Randy Harmon comes in and says, if this group can't help unlock Edmonds, then it's time to move on now or never. And that is a sort of perfect little transition here to the linebacking core. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, obviously they're our starters, right? Like we know there are starters. You know, Randy talked about unlocking Edmonds here. I think he has to do that, but I don't know how much of that we're going to see in training camp. I don't know how much of, despite the fact that a reporter today asked if there was any drills that can make him more clutch, I don't think that you're going to see. I don't think you're going to see Tremaine
Just move
Edmonds
that clutch slider
reaching.
up on Madden all the way up to the top. 99.
I don't think you're going to see any drills that are going to help us assess that from Tremaine Edmonds or even Matt Milano in camp. So things with Edmonds and even preseason, because it's very vanilla. It's going to be, that's going to be like a pause and wait till week one. Let's hope they're healthy. Keeping those two guys healthy throughout the season is another thing to talk about. But setting those two guys aside, looking at the rest of the linebackers, Tyrell Dodson, you know, talking to Eric in the Cover One group chat, third linebacker in base on day one, and the backup Mike linebacker behind Edmonds calling the plays from his helmet. That's big. Baylon Spector was running as the backup middle linebacker today behind Tremaine Edmonds. Terrell Bernard has flashed, catching a lot of people's eyes with his pass coverage, you know, going step for step with guys like Dawson Knox, you know, having that nice pass breakup. So what are your thoughts on the guys scratching and clawing to be that first linebacker off the bench for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems, at least right now, that it looks like it would be Dodson based on kind of what Eric was saying and sort of how his role has started out, at least in camp. But I think you're going to see Bernard get those chances as well. Obviously, with the physical stature of Bernard, you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be coming in as the backup Mike, but maybe in some interesting situations in pass coverage, as was mentioned, right? Baylon Spector, we talked about him. Both of us talked about him as being a wild card player to make the roster. And I think with the Andre Smith suspension, the fact that he ran with the backup, ran as the backup Mike on day two, is a good start for him, right? We'll see if that continues, but it's a good start at least. And I think that all three of these guys have, I mean, well, Dodson and Bernard, obviously, I think clearly on the inside right now of the roster, but Spector kind of making his case to almost be a roster lock, at least through 2 days. And it's premature to say that, but I'll say it is premature to say that, but you'd like to hear this type of report as opposed to him not being anywhere to be found, right? Like that's what you're.
So instead of calling him a lock, you could say, like, in my opinion, I'm pretty confident that there is a spot on the 53-man roster for Baylon Spector right now. And I look at that, right? And because I have right here my notes, I am confident that Baylon Spector makes the 53. The Bills traditionally keep 6 linebackers: Edmonds, Milano, Dodson, probably with his experience, Bernard, Matakevich, that's 5. Who's the 6th guy? I'm feeling confident it's going to be the guy they drafted over the 2 guys who have been on and off NFL rosters over the course of their career, Joe Giles Harris and Markel Lee. So they're going to go with that guy they drafted in, Baylon Spector. And Andre Smith is suspended. So week 6, they look, Andre Smith comes off the suspension list. They sit there and they assess. Baylon Spector, have you done enough to stay on the 53-man roster? Okay. You have. Andre Smith, we're cutting you. No one's probably going to want you. We'll sign you to the practice squad.
Yep.
If Baylon Spector struggles in the first 6 weeks, you have Giles Harris or Markel Lee, who you probably can keep on your practice squad anyway, at least one of the 2 that you can call up if need be, or you have Andre Smith waiting in the wings in week 6 if he struggles. But I think the tie goes to, and the Bills want the draft pick, the guy with 4 years of cheap term, to be the one who wins that 6th linebacker job. And I'm way more confident right now, a million times more confident right now than I was the day he was drafted.
Oh yeah. That goes without saying. I mean, I think there were plenty of offensive lineman guard stuff still on the board, like late in that draft. And I was like, we go with a linebacker really after we had already taken Bernard early. It was a very interesting pick, but you can kind of see maybe the Bills really finally trying to turn over the bottom of that linebacker depth chart, because we know Matakevich is going to be there. So, hey, this is their chance to do it. And I, look, if he can crack the roster as a special teamer and take Andre Smith's spot, I don't think anyone's really gonna
Yeah.
be losing any sleep over that. Maybe Randy will
Mhm.
lose some sleep over that.
Yeah, Randy comes in and says, "Okay, Judge, in my opinion, Baylon Spector will be trash once the pad goes on." I know he's a very anti-Clemson guy, but just to clean up some of my notes here, I, I did some research on Pro Football Reference, looking at snap counts and stuff. If you look at the snap count in preparation for the show, because one of the takes I had in my notes before training camp kicked off was, if you look at the snap counts for Markel Lee last year on Pro Football Reference, defense to special teams, and Tyrell Dodson, they're practically the same. They pretty much
Mhm.
mirror each other. They took just about the same amount of special team snaps, and I think Tyrell Dodson outsnapped Markel Lee on defense like 76 to like 30 something. Obviously, Markel Lee was doing what he was doing for the Las Vegas Raiders, but they were essentially the same. Markel Lee was playing the same role for the Raiders that Tyrell Dodson was for the Bills, and the Buffalo Bills had signed Markel Lee once. I think they even maybe they might have signed him 2 times already, and this might be the 3rd time he's back on the team. The
I
Bills have
think
shown
so.
consistent interest in Markel Lee. So the whole time I'm thinking to myself, like, man, maybe this linebacker competition is a little more, could be a little bit more competitive than we think. But then I hear Eric saying the dude's running second team Mike calling the plays. He's the first linebacker off the bench. That could change 2 weeks from now. We could be having a completely different conversation. But at least through 2 days, I'm feeling pretty confident that the 6 linebackers are going to be Edmonds, Milano, Dodson, Bernard, Matakevich, and Spector right now. I think those are the 6 favorites, at least right now. And it'll be interesting to see in 2 weeks whether that changes and
Yep.
whether the depth chart starts to change. So, and then Bernard still looks very thin. I thought they would try to beef him up, but he still looks pretty thin, listed at 223. I don't think he's ever going to be like an AJ Klein base defense type of replacement. But I was listening to some of the things that Leslie Frazier had to say in his press conference. They asked him specifically about Bernard and what kind of role he was playing. And Frazier made an interesting comment. He said, linebackers and safeties sort of are kind of interchangeable in today's NFL, or have to be interchangeable. They have to share responsibilities. And that really got me to thinking, you obviously don't want to take Teron Johnson off the field. Your base is your nickel. Teron Johnson is one of, if not the best nickel corners in the National Football League. You don't want him off the field. But you have a team like the Ravens on the schedule. You have a team like the Patriots on the schedule. Instead of throwing a Tyrell Dodson out there in base who might not be able to drop back into pass coverage when they try to flex you out, you have a guy like Bernard who's a little bit beefier than, Teron Johnson, but also can blitz and has coverage chops. So I think a guy like Terrell Bernard, maybe he's that thick nickel, thick dime that we've been, or big nickel, thick dime that we've been talking about for the last, seems like 100 years. Maybe this is the role that they have caved out for Bernard. But right now it seems like he's strictly running at weak side linebacker behind Matt Milano.
Yeah, and that's okay for right now, right? I think
Mhm.
that as he gets comfortable in that role, and then Frazier starts putting more on him. But I do like the fact that Frazier at least acknowledged the evolution of the defensive side of the
Mhm.
ball in the NFL, right? We've talked like e- everyone talks about how the passing game has changed, like how the offense, rules have catered to the offense, blah blah blah, over the last decade plus. But like defenses have had to adapt as well, and that sort of linebacker safety hybrid type player is something that NFL teams are going to have to acknowledge now. And like,
Mhm.
say what you want about Belichick, he's kind of had these type of guys on his teams. Other teams have had these types of sort of role players. We remember who was the guy with the Cardinals, the safety sort of linebacker flex guy they used for a long time. Um, he was like too small to be a linebacker, but like too big to be a safety. Can't remember his name.
Cardinals.
Cardinals, yeah.
Bernard Pollard. Oh,
No.
oh, I know who you're talking about. Give me a minute. Keep talking.
Yep.
I'll get to the bottom
Anyway,
of it.
I think starting Bernard out with a true sort of position, not putting too much on his plate starting out, is the right call. As he gets comfortable throughout camp, then maybe you start mixing him into certain specialty packages you have. And I think that he will be ready for it, right? And I think that one thing I want to see also the Bills do with Bernard is kind of see how they use him on in pass rushing situations as well, because he's been obviously scouted and productive in his career as a pass rusher from the linebacker spot. So that's something that could give you a little bit of flexibility as well. But I'm trying to remember who the
Deion Buchanan.
Deion
Deion
Buchanan.
Buchanan,
Yep, that's what I
who
was
I'm
thinking.
looking up his height weight, 6'1", 211. So Bernard is what, 6'1", 223. So
Yeah.
similar-ish size too. So yeah, it should be interesting. He was listed as a safety for the longest time, and then towards the end of his career, once he lost a step, they just started listing him strictly as sort of a weak side linebacker, sort of that sort of Brian Scott type of role when he was at the end
That's
of
the guy who I was thinking about.
his career with the Bills. Randy Harmon, CR coming in, asking you to smash that like button. There's 115 of you in here. We would super appreciate if you just take 2-3 seconds if you like what you're hearing, or even if you don't, to smash that like button for us. It helps us with the algorithm.